Pray. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity of serving our people. We ask you for the strength to make laws that will benefit all Albertans, and the courage to resist making laws that do not, and finally, for the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Introduction of visitors.
Mr. Speaker, in your gallery today is a special visitor to Alberta. He's visiting our province for the first time. I'd like to introduce to you and to members of the legislature His Excellency Gilberto Carrasquero, Venezuelan Ambassador to Canada, and we're delighted that he could be here with us today. If you'd rise.
Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports. Introduction of special guests.
Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, earlier today it was my pleasure to present the second annual Alberta Environment Awards. The award recipients were selected by a committee which included representatives from Alberta Environment, the Environment Council of Alberta, and 2 members of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, the Honourable Member from Calgary-Glenmore and the Honourable Member from Innisfail. This year, 1 award was presented in each of 4 categories, and I'd like to introduce the winners in your gallery, Mr. Speaker. I would ask all of our guests to remain standing until all are introduced. First is Mrs. Joyce Dawkin, who received an award on behalf of her husband Gordon, who was recognized posthumously in the individual citizen category. Also here are Mr. Dawkins' son Clint and daughter Gail. In the category of Business, Industry and Government Agency, I was pleased to present an award to the Eastern Irrigation District. Representing the Eastern Irrigation District is Mr. Bill Mortensen, Chairman of the Board, and EID General Manager, Mr. Jim Weber. The third award for contributions in environmental education was presented to the 4-H clubs of Alberta. Lisa Perperzi, 4-H club member, and Gordon Shaber, who was a member of the Alberta 4-H Council and a volunteer 4-H adult leader, accepted the award on behalf of the Alberta 4-H clubs. In the newly created category of volunteer organization, the Prairie Association for Water Management was the award recipient. I would like to introduce Mr. Harry Gordon, President of the Prairie Association for Water Management, and his wife Agnes. Mr. Speaker, I would ask that our colleagues provide to these very special Albertans a most warm welcome.
Honourable Member Edmonton Beverley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pleasure for me this afternoon to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly 40 grade 6 students from St. Maria Greddy School, which is located in the Edmonton Beverley constituency. The pupils are joined with their teachers, Tom Hughes and Bob Wichenko. They're seated in the public gallery. I'd ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the legislature.
Honourable Member Rocky Mountain House.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This afternoon I have the privilege to introduce to you and through you to the rest of the Assembly on behalf of the member from Drayton Valley, 27 students from the Breton Elementary School. They're accompanied by their teacher, Ron Flanders, and the parents, Linda William, Hilda Friesen, Margaret LaChance, and Dorothy Westland. They're seated in the members' gallery, and I ask them to rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Honourable Member Edmonton Meadowlark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to introduce to you and through you to the members of the legislature 2 classes, grade 5 and 6, 46 students from Collingwood Elementary School, They are accompanied today by their teachers, Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Frizzell, and by a teacher's aide, Ms. Zapasaki. I would ask that they rise in the gallery and receive the welcome of the legislature.
Honourable Member Edmonton Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you and to members of the Assembly 20 grade 10 and 11 students from St. Luke's School in the constituency of Calder. This is a very special school, Mr. Speaker, in that most of the students come from Hong Kong. They are accompanied by their teachers Terry Fletcher and Robert Vondon. They are seated in the public gallery, and I would ask that they rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct my question to the Minister responsible for housing. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the inner city and the larger cities in Alberta is characterized by tenements and decaying housing, to say the least. And most of it, as you probably know, is owned by absentee landlords and therefore continues to decay. I wonder if the Minister responsible for housing will say if his government is considering reviving programs such as the now defunct Neighbourhood Improvement Program so that decent, affordable shelter can be constructed or refurbished in the area now characterized by decay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The inner city in Edmonton and Calgary or any other place in Alberta is of great concern to the members on this side as well as to those opposite. A week ago we were reviewing our policing there, and now into housing. We have a number of programs that we presently deliver that are used to house people in the inner city. The hard-to-house special purpose housing, which we have 438 units in Edmonton, 435 in Calgary. We have subsidized housing for lower income families and individuals in our community housing and CHIP and MAP programs, of which we have in excess of 800 in Edmonton, 1,486 in Calgary. We have a number of seniors projects where we have over 1,000 units in Edmonton and 1,400 in Calgary. I think it shows that we have a great contribution to the housing for those who are hard to house. I might point out that in those special purpose projects, it's the private sector, the non-profit group, that should come forward with an application on how they would like to house the particular community that they see need that help.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister recites existing projects and fails to note that he's got nothing on the drawing boards. Is the Minister considering kick-starting programs such as that initiated by, say, the Mennonite Central Committee, which gets people who are currently on unemployment insurance or welfare working on refurbishing to create affordable, not-for-profit housing for those people in their inner city who currently have no other place to go but to the slumlords?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member wasn't listening. The special purpose housing projects have not been fully taken up for this current year. Those are non-profit groups that can come forward with an application to show how they would like to house the hard-to-house in the inner cities. Edmonton currently has a 6.9% vacancy rate in their apartments. The majority of those apartments are the CHIP MAP, which are subsidized 50% by an agreement when these buildings were built. They're available. There's many, many. We have a number of other projects that are underway within the community. We're concerned, but also there has to be some initiative by the agencies and groups that want these.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know of agencies that have gone to the Minister and been turned down for funding. Mr. Speaker, is the Minister prepared to act upon any of the recommendations that were made last year by the Edmonton Coalition on Homelessness so that people are not forced to stay in slum environments, so that they've got some decent alternatives to turn to?
Mr. Speaker, if there is an agency that has had an application and feels that they were unjustly treated and did in fact have it turned down, I'd be more than willing to discuss that with the member if she wishes to bring forward the application.
final supplementary. The minister's had my letter for months, Mr. Speaker. My question to the minister is this. Is he saying that his government is prepared to let these absentee landlords continue to rake money in hand over fist while his government is not going to take any further steps to stop the decaying of inner cities?
Mr. Speaker, again the member has her earplugs in. I just reiterated a number of initiatives that are available for people to access. If the member wishes to discuss this alleged letter with me that's been in my office for months, I'd be more than happy, but I would ask her that she bring the answer with her.
Supplementary, Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the minister, and this comes out of a response that he made about housing and policing. And my question to the minister is, what effect have the foot patrols had in these areas of high crime where the foot patrol officers are on the street interacting with the people? What effect has that had in some of these areas?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The neighborhood policing is a relatively new concept in Edmonton, but the initial statistics show that it's helped to keep the level of crime down somewhat and has developed an extremely close rapport between the citizens of that area, the businessmen of that area, and the police force, which is certainly a step in the right direction.
Supplementary, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Minister, would not now be a very good time for the Minister to consider pushing on his colleagues to reinstitute the rental tax credit, which would be particularly a great help to very low-income people and people in this type of distress?
Mr. Speaker, the rental tax credit is under the jurisdiction of my associate, the Minister of Municipal Affairs. However, for the people that are hard to house, I don't feel that that's the answer of a rental tax credit. We need to fill more of our empty vacancies there are now with subsidized housing.
Supplementary, Calgary McKnight.
As one member who happens to live in one of the oldest parts of Calgary, I wonder if the Honourable Minister could confirm whether or not there has been any agency that has requested funds for the construction of a single women's shelter in the city of Calgary.
I can't really answer that, as women's shelters come under the jurisdiction of the Minister of Social Services.
Second question, official opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to designate that second question to the member for Edmonton Strathcona.
My question is not to the Solicitor General, but to the Acting Attorney General. Perhaps the Acting Attorney General is familiar with the Hetherington case, which deals with gross royalty trusts and the difficulties that have arisen in the decision that said they could not be registered on the title. Consequently, the trust companies, for the most part, who administer these trusts are unable to pay out to the holders of the beneficiaries of the trust, who, for the most part, Mr. Speaker, are fairly humble people with a bit extra on the old age pension and so on. Will the Acting Attorney General agree that the decision may be perfectly legal and correct in law, but is an unjust one in its effects?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for his question, but I don't think it's the place for the Attorney General or the Acting Attorney General to cast aspersions or congratulations on a court decision. There's no doubt that the Hetherington case has put a number of people into a flux because they don't know whether they have their gross royalty trust agreements that can be held up or not. I might point out that the matter at issue in this case revolves around an agreement between the trust companies and the original landowner. And in the Hetherington case, it was decided by Mr. Justice O'Leary that these particular royalty trust agreements did not create an interest in land, therefore were not caveatable, were not protected, and that has put some people into a flux. I can also point out that the case is being appealed, and the appeal will be heard in October. We as a government are, of course, monitoring this very, very closely because there are a lot of people that are put into flux. But the nub of the matter is the agreement between the trust company and the original landowner.
We won't get into a legal argument, Mr. Speaker, at all. But the fact, as the Acting Attorney General has indicated, is that there is a state of flux. Will he not agree that this state of flux can be easily remedied in the way of justice by a simple amendment to the Land Titles Act?
Mr. Speaker, that may help or gloss over the problem that a number of the landowners that have a relationship to the original agreement and the present owner of the mines and minerals. However, from the 40s and 50s, when these trust agreements first came into effect, there's been a number of new interests that have been and are presently under control. And I think it's very important that when you're addressing this matter, you look at the entire picture so that you don't help one person by destroying somebody else's interests. The remedy has to adjust beneficially for everyone.
But, Mr. Speaker, that was the point of my original question, that the status quo ante was just, and the present situation has nothing to be said for it. In those circumstances, what does the government propose to do?
Again, the honourable member missed the first point in my first answer too, is the decision in this matter was made by Mr. Justice O'Leary based on the law, and until the Court of Appeal has had a chance to investigate and review the material in this case and make their judgment in October, we'll have to wait for that, and in the meantime are monitoring and assuring people that their interests are being looked into.
Order, please. The chair is beginning to get fidgety itself, whether or not this matter would be, because it's before the courts, would fall under the rule of sub judice. So perhaps the honourable member for Strathcona could phrase his next question to set the chair at ease.
Yes, we're not discussing the case before the court at all, Mr. Speaker, but simply a government policy on the Land Titles Act. And in that connection, should the appeal fail, does the government undertake to amend the Land Titles Act to make what people have considered to be the rules and have been obeying them for 40 or 50 years still continue to be the case?
Mr. Speaker, that's somewhat hypothetical, but this government has always had the people's interests at heart. If it's found that the court determines that there is a defect that can be remedied, we'll have our answer prepared at that time.
Honourable Member, Calgary-Buffalo, supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's the duty of the government to ensure that the law is clear in important commercial areas affecting large numbers of people. In the current case, the Supreme Court of Canada may be, the current case before the courts may be appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada, and there may be a long delay. Since fairness seems to favor the royalty owners, would it not be better to move immediately to protect the royalty holders, at least in respect of transfers or leases which take place subsequent to the present time?
Mr. Speaker, this member also did not listen to the entire answer previously. Those interests are being looked into, but there are subsequent interests that have arisen from the period of the 40s and 50s to now, and you don't want to erase those interests to protect some of the others, and I think you have to look at the entire picture to make sure that everyone's interests are addressed.
Supplementary, main question, Leader of the Liberal, Honourable Member Calgary North Hills, supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, a supplementary to the Solicitor General, the Acting Attorney General. Is it fair to say that the difficulties may have arisen by virtue of a deficiency in the particular agreements rather than a deficiency in the law?
That is true.
That's true.
Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Treasury branches are preparing to celebrate their 50th anniversary here in Alberta. And to commemorate that event, rather well-known right-wing publication called the Alberta Report is preparing a special edition of their magazine. Now, Mr. Speaker, I've received a copy of a form letter prepared and distributed by the Treasury branch managers sent to customers suggesting that they purchase advertising from the Alberta Report for this special edition. Now, my question, Mr. Speaker, is to the provincial treasurer: why are the Treasury branch managers soliciting advertising on behalf of the Alberta Report?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I'm not too sure just what the answer to that question is. I must say that I'm unaware that the Treasury branches is doing what you've indicated. I'm not too sure. It's not inappropriate. If, in fact, along with 2,300,000 Albertans, we are, in fact, celebrating a unique year with the history of the Treasury branches, serving the people of Alberta in a very efficient and effective manner. And that is a record, one which is admired across Canada, and I'm sure that what we're trying to do in the case of making sure that's understood is to recognize a significant event, and we're doing that ourselves.
Mr. Speaker, I may table this letter, and that way you can see it. When your friendly banker calls you up to buy an ad, it's like a policeman asking you to buy tickets to the ball after speeding. So I think, Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that the provincial treasurer, I wonder if he is exercising some effect. Now, would, Mr. Speaker...
Order, please. What is the honourable leader intending to do with this?
Table it, yeah.
I'm sorry, you'll have to revert back to daily routine to do that.
I could keep it. It's just usually the Speaker asks for the letter I'm referring to, so I'll keep it then unless I'm asked. Mr. Speaker, I will then see that he gets a copy of the letter. But what assurance does the Treasurer have that those customers wanting to purchase, not wanting to purchase Alberta or advertising in the Alberta Report will not be discriminated against in their banking practices?
Mr. Speaker, I have indicated before in this House that the policy of the government is to leave the administrative responsibilities to the very capable managers who run the Treasury branch. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that without knowing the details of this procedure, and I will check it to confirm, that I would say that it's a 90% probability there's nothing untoward in terms of this process. In fact, I doubt very much there's any indication that there's any kind of retribution should you not participate in this proposal, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure it's simply done in a way to recognize those people who are participating now in the Treasury branch, because there's a vast number of people who are enjoying the benefits of operating there.
Mr. Speaker, I will then file this letter then. I think that's the proper word rather than table it. Mr. Speaker, I would think that the employees of the government have much more to do than shill for some right-wing magazine selling advertising. Could you tell the House or share with the House how much that was cost this special edition of the Alberta Report will cost the taxpayers of Alberta and the Treasury branches?
If it gets new business.
Mr. Speaker, it would seem to me that here we have, first of all on the record, the fact that the Treasury branches are celebrating the 50th anniversary. It isn't any secret, Mr. Speaker, that Treasury branches have been very successful, not just in Alberta, but are probably about the 17th or 18th largest financial institution in Canada. They have grown fairly rapidly. It would seem to me, if you're looking at the policy considerations with respect to Treasury branches, Mr. Speaker, as opposed to some sort of a FET, which we're not too sure how is taking place, would be to deal with how we can expand the Treasury branches, how we can make them healthier in the context of the economic climate, and to use the words of the Liberal Party across the way, how we can ensure that the Treasury branches become a vehicle of diversification and assistance to small business. Now, those are the issues, Mr. Speaker, that I concern myself with, and this government takes as part of our fundamental policy with respect to diversification, and it's in that sense that the government is serving Albertans. And I think the Treasury branches have been considered to be one of the remarkable success stories going back to my colleague's days, 1933, I guess, the Social Credit Party, who saw, I'm not inferring...
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Final supplementary.
Speaker, these people are twisting the legs of small-town business and taking money away from the local publishers. Given the fact that the Alberta Report, Mr. Speaker, and associated companies over the years have benefited quite handsomely from the Alberta Opportunity Companies and bank guarantees by these people, will he not get on the blower as soon as possible and tell the leader there, or the manager of the Treasury branches, to cease and desist threatening small-town businessmen in order to buy ads in that in the Alberta report.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I know that the sophisticated people in this province who deal with the Treasury branches know very well that this is not a threat. This is simply a way to celebrate a remarkable success story. Now, the member across the way should be more thankful that, in fact, this institution has worked, going back to the Depression of 1933, seeing its rise through difficult times, building on the populist movements. These are the things that you should be arguing, not the ones that we should be arguing, Mr. Speaker. But the thing is, we are the ones who have made it successful. We are the ones who have made it work in the last 15 years.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Supplementary Athabasca Laxafish?
Yes, to Mr. Speaker, to the Treasurer, relating to Alberta report. I wonder if the Minister can answer this question. Why did the government in the April 19th special issue of the Alberta report purchase over $40,000 dollars worth of advertising, a total of 12.5 full pages in the one issue of the Alberta report? How can you justify that?
Again, Mr. Speaker, there is a framework, a reasonable editorial policy that takes place in that paper, Mr. Speaker.
Listen.
Now, Mr. Speaker, that was a humorous aside, in case the member didn't realize it. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, this is an important magazine in Western Canada. It happens to be head office in Alberta, Mr. Speaker, and we are not going out of our way to force-feed that paper, I can assure you. But if there is an opportunity to provide some advertising in that edition to ensure that the objectives of Albertans are recognized and properly noted, then it's a reasonable response of government to do just that.
Honourable Member Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure glad there are a few right-wingers left, because there's sure a lot of left-wingers in this poor country. Mr. Speaker, my question is on the question on drought to two ministers, on one concern on fire hazards and the other about ground conditions. First of all, to the Minister of Forestry, Lands and Wildlife, can the Minister indicate to us what the situation is province-wide as to the drought situation as it affects our forests?
Mr. Speaker, it certainly is of concern to us, the drought, not only in the forest area, but all across the province. That's changed somewhat overnight with the rains that we've had, but we positioned our fire attack crews and our monitoring to make sure that we can get quickly at areas where fires do start. We do not have any fires out of control at the moment. I'm very thankful about that. But we're monitoring the weather conditions on an ongoing basis because it is an area of deep concern to us.
Mr. Speaker, can the Minister indicate to us what the situation is as far as budgeting? Are we looking at a large overrun that we'll have to have special warrants for, or is it around an average amount?
Mr. Speaker, if it keeps raining, we shouldn't have to worry, but I have to say that as of the 26th of this month, we've expended some $10,650,000 already out of a $13 million budget. So, of course, it's an area that we may have to come for special warrants, but we're hopeful that we'll get the rains and everything that'll hopefully the fire conditions won't be as serious in the future.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary to the Minister of the Environment, when you speak to old-timers as old as the Liberal leader, they will tell you, Mr. Minister, that the ground conditions are probably as bad as they've been for many, many years. Can the Minister of the Environment indicate if the Department has done any studies across the province to indicate what the surface moisture conditions and, most importantly, or just as importantly, the sub-moisture conditions are province-wide?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we monitor that and have been monitoring that on a weekly basis, and the situation in the province of Alberta, in a quick overview nutshell, is that particularly with the groundwater conditions, and groundwater refers to that water which is beneath the surface of the earth. Alberta Environment has 250 test wells throughout the province of Alberta, and more than half of them are now recording the lowest levels in their recorded history. And that's been monitored, as I indicate, on a week-to-week basis. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, we put out an advisory now once every 2 weeks, which indicates what the water condition is in all of the waterways in the province of Alberta. And in essence, prior to this weekend. Every one of them showed a very low level in terms of waterways in our province. We've monitored throughout the province of Alberta dugouts, lakes and the like, and in a very easy way, it's easy to generalize to basically say that all of them have deteriorated and all of them depleted themselves in the last 12 months. And in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, we have sophisticated monitoring equipment in the Rocky Mountains that judges the snow cap, and that snow cap that we've just gone through this last winter was the lowest snow cap in recorded history in our province.
Final supplementary, Clover Bar.
Speaker, to the Minister of Agriculture, in light of the fact that many farmers and cattlemen especially were in a crisis situation, can the Minister, the Agricultural Minister, indicate if the piping and water transfer program is making any progress in catching up to the crisis situation?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we're making a considerable amount of progress as it relates to filling dugouts with our piping equipment. And as I've indicated in the past to honourable members, the honourable member from Clover Bar included, and other honourable members, if they are aware of individual circumstances whereby there is a peculiar difficulty, we're more than happy to give special consideration to those areas.
Edmonton Glengarry, supplementary.
Thank you. For the Minister of the Environment, the Minister of Forestry isn't the only one who's been facing some unexpected expenditures for fighting forest fires. Is the Minister considering any extra assistance for municipalities who have had inordinate expenditures fighting forest fires?
Mr. Speaker, that would come to me, I guess, as Minister of Alberta Public Safety Services, and in recent weeks, contact has been made with a number of municipalities to the west of the city of Edmonton, and contact has also been made with the Reeve of the County of Athabasca, and in all cases we've indicated to them that I would look forward to receiving definitive information from them as to the extent of the local expenditures that they've had with respect to firefighting. And once I receive that, we'll sit down and talk to them about any special consideration that may be forthcoming.
Supplementary, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Environment. There's some surprise that I've heard him admit that the water pressure and levels of the groundwaters are dropping in Alberta, and he's quite correct. Mr. Speaker, is further to that, in view of the fact that Cargill is depending on groundwater in the High River area, and on my reports are the High River pressure is dropping in the groundwater also. Does he still think there's enough water in the groundwater under High River to run the Cargill plant?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party would say that he said that he's surprised that I would have said what I said today. I've been saying this since the third week of January 1988. In fact, I said it first of all at the public meeting of the Alberta Association of Improvement Districts, which was reported, Mr. Speaker, 6 months.
Oh, Honourable Minister, can the chair then assume the question has been answered many times? Honourable Member Grand Prairie.
Got their attention now, Bob. Got their attention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is the Minister of Transportation and Utilities. My topic is the 4-H cleanup program we've had along our highways. In the Grand Prairie area, Mr. Speaker, we had an exceptionally successful cleanup program. All the area was covered, an immense amount of garbage was gathered. And I was wondering if the Minister could give us an indication of how the program continued through the province in terms of number of people involved and the amount of miles covered, or whether information you might have on it.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we have the figures in for the 1988 cleanup. There were some 67,343 bags of garbage picked up. I'm not sure that's something Albertans should be totally proud of. The number of miles covered, 5,735. The number of young people involved in the program, 10,636, and I was speaking of young people. The number of clubs involved, the highest ever, 616, and while we have a number of people in the Speaker's Gallery from the 4-H movement of Alberta, I would like to publicly thank them for the excellent job that they do in cleaning up Alberta's highways.
Supplementary, Grand Prairie.
Mr. Speaker, were there any injuries or near misses this year in the program on the highways?
Not that I'm aware of. It was a good program and everything went according to Hoyle.
Grand Prairie supplementary.
Final supplementary. Is there any thought being given to a continuing cleanup program that would keep our highways clean so we don't have to go into an annual cleanup as we've been doing, Mr. Speaker?
No, although I think if all Albertans, particularly Albertans, were to exercise restraint on throwing things out the windows of vehicles, it would certainly go a long way toward cleaning up our province. I think we have probably the cleanest province in Canada, and maybe possibly one of the cleanest areas in North America, and that tribute goes to the 4-H movement for the backbone that they have had. They have been really the backbone of the program. It's not all 4-H, I might say, but the 4-H have the first choice because they were first in, and then it's the movement of the JFW people as well as school groups, and for that we thank them again.
Supplementary, Edmund Glengarry.
Thank you. For the Minister of Transportation, does he have any plans to transfer this refuse to the Minister of the Environment for it to be separated and some of it to be recycled?
We have been doing that together for some time, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member Edmonton. Honourable Member Edmonton Meadowlark.
For years, we have fought to protect our energy producers against the interests of Eastern Canadian consumers. Now, with the free trade agreement and the federal implementation legislation we saw last week, we are giving up powers critical to that battle, and in effect, we are adding a third party at our own federal-provincial negotiating table, and that third party is the United States of America.
Question, please.
To the Premier, will the Premier please admit that the free trade agreement and the corresponding federal free trade implementation legislation will result in us giving up provincial power over resource pricing?
No, we won't, Mr. Speaker.
Will the Premier admit that this circumstance also will result in our giving up provincial power over the licensing for extraction and development of energy resources in this province?
Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, Meadowlark.
With 80% of Canadian trade with the United States already free, why would this government put Alberta in a position of giving up important provincial powers over provincial jurisdictions in order to achieve a small marginal increment in free trade of about 10%?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has now, on 3 successive times, started off his questions with a false premise.
Right. It's frightening that you don't have a better understanding of this particular issue. Has the Premier received explicit assurances that the Prime Minister will alter his free trade implementation legislation in light of concerns from provincial premiers, and hopefully this will be one of those provincial premiers, about the erosion of provincial powers over provincial jurisdictions?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary, Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, would the Premier reassure this Assembly that should the price of gas increase dramatically, that the Mulroney trade agreement will not prevent the Government of Alberta from reintroducing the Alberta gas rebate plan?
Chair has some difficulty with a hypothetical situation. However, I suppose if the Honourable Premier wants to answer a hypothetical question, that would be his choice. Honourable Member.
Well, I should never answer a hypothetical question. Although I should say, in terms of the free trade agreement, it does not prevent us from providing natural gas rebates.
Supplementary, Redger North.
Supplementary to the Premier, Mr. Speaker. In light of the worldwide trend to free trade, does the Premier have assurances that the free trade agreement will protect Alberta from the future rape of its resources as we witnessed by the Liberal federal government some years ago?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, it will certainly provide the basis for doing that, and it will also provide the basis for the producers in Alberta who produce so much more than they use to sell that product in the biggest market in the world, the United States, our friends and neighbors. And, Mr. Speaker, it ends up with Alberta farmers and ranchers and petrochemical industries and forestry industries all able to reach a market that they have not been able to reach on an assured basis before. Albertans are looking forward to this initiative, looking forward to the economic benefits. And it is, again, interesting that the party who
supported the National Energy Program, which hurt our province, now wants to hit the free trade agreement, which helps our province. Right. You wonder who they represent.
That's right. Honourable Member Evelyn Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are to the Minister of Social Services. On June 1st, food allowances to people on social assistance will increase by approximately $5 per month or 50 cents per day. The problem for many welfare recipients is not so much the food allowance that they receive, but the fact that the food allowance must be used to cover other basic needs like shelter.
Question, honourable member.
Well, in view of the fact then that recent statistics compiled by CMHC indicate that an average one-bedroom apartment in Edmonton costs $388, will the minister make a commitment to increase the shelter allowance for single employables so that their rent, or that would reflect the true cost of the rent?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member obviously asked her question under the premise that we believe that the taxpayers of Alberta should support single employables, each of them in their own apartment. And, Mr. Speaker, that is not our view. We believe that it is appropriate for people to share accommodation just like others have to when money is short.
Supplementary, Calder.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, even if they share, they're not receiving enough money, Mr. Speaker. In view of the fact that 2 adults with 1 child on social assistance receives approximately $5 each per day for not only food but clothing and all other personal expenses, can the minister prove that this amount is adequate by providing this House with the cost of living studies that she has used to determine the rates?
Mr. Speaker, obviously the cost of living in various people's eyes is going to be different depending on what it is your belief, in terms of your belief of what it is you require as a need. And the definition of need is a very perilous one to embark on, Mr. Speaker. It is different for every single individual that you speak to. Mr. Speaker, I just want to go back to the comment that the honourable member made as, again, a preface to her second question. In fact, Mr. Speaker, 2 people sharing an accommodation can indeed manage to secure a 1-bedroom apartment. 215 times 2 makes 430.
Supplementary, Calder.
Well, they're not even given a damage deposit, Mr. Speaker. In view of the fact that the Consumer Price Index indicates that the average cost of clothing has increased by more than 10% and utilities have increased more than 30% since 1982, can the minister state what measurement she is using to indicate that social allowance rates are adequate to cover these increases?
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member would interview many people on social allowance, she will find that there is a very high percentage of those people very successful in securing the daily needs that they require with the amount of money that's provided for by government. And, Mr. Speaker, I think that in speaking to, again, the single employables, Mr. Speaker, I think the honourable member has a very interesting view of what it is that this society and all taxpayers must support.
Final supplementary, Calder.
Final supplementary. Since many social allowance recipients have difficulty properly feeding their children because their food money is often used for other necessities, when is this minister going to ensure that children do get 3 square meals a day by using objective criteria as the basis to set social allowance rates?
Mr. Speaker, by interviewing many families in this province, not only from my own constituency but right across the board, by reading the mail that comes into my office that speaks to the amount of money that is allocated, the dollars with respect to food and shelter are adequate. Now, it is true, if they are not spent on the necessities and they are spent on other things, there will be a shortage. And I think the honourable member should encourage those families who may be spending their dollars, and they're tight. If they spend them on non-essentials, there will not be enough. I don't believe it is up to the taxpayers of this province to supply money to individuals who are not managing their budget properly. But if the honourable member has circumstances that are beyond the control of a family, either through the appeal system or other mechanisms, I can assure the honourable member that we would try to speak to those needs.
Supplementary, Vermillion Viking.
Yes, supplemental to the minister. Have you any studies that would indicate how many of the single employables, what percentage, would have family ties that probably should and could support them in their day-to-day needs?
Mr. Speaker, well, I do not have that kind of information, though it may rest in many of the files as people are interviewed. I think it's appropriate to state that given the legislation which governs this area, it is incumbent upon government to supply certain basic needs for those who can't achieve them in other places. But, Mr. Speaker, when one looks at the premise, I believe, for the Honourable Member for Calder, when one looks at the premise that people would normally be residing someplace at this moment when they go in to achieve some type of assistance, surely they would have put a damage deposit on that place. Damage deposits, interestingly enough.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Supplementary, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. In view of, I've had a number of phone calls, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister on people that were single parents attending university and post-secondary education institutions that when summer months come, they try to go on social assistance. They then cut off being able to apply for loans to go back to school.
Question, Honourable Leader.
Make it possible for them to do both.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to look into that situation. I am aware in a number of cases where people have gotten assistance from my department over the course of the summer, as well as accessing student loans. And I don't know whether that was done in a proper manner, but we will check into that policy.
Red North, followed by Athabasca Lac-La-Biche at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Hospitals and Healthcare. It's no secret in Alberta and actually all throughout Canada that the level of cooperation between medical physicians and chiropractors is not exactly terrific. One unfortunate example of the fallout that occurs from this lack of cooperation happens when a patient goes to a medical physician, receives a diagnosis and an x-ray, then wants to go to a chiropractor for a second opinion, but cannot get access to the x-ray.
Question, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just on my third sentence now. That particular practice means the patient has to be x-rayed twice at double cost to the system and a double exposure to a harmful x-ray. Can the Minister please tell us why he allows this situation to exist?
Mr. Speaker, that matter has been raised with me, and it is indeed unfortunate that different members of different professions are not able to somehow or other cooperate adequately to ensure that people do not have to have two x-rays at a double cost, I might say, to the system. I'm presently looking into the matter to see if there is something that might be done.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, another example of this unfortunate circumstance. Is the Minister prepared to investigate the present policy which does not permit a chiropractor to refer a patient to a medical specialist, so the patient has to go to the chiropractor, then a general practitioner, then the specialist, resulting in great extra cost to the system?
Mr. Speaker, again, that's a matter that is up to the profession and is usually the subject of the code of ethics of the particular profession, and I don't believe that the government would be able to offer any remedy to that. With respect to the first question, however, specifically about x-rays, I can advise that one of the options that we are presently considering is to require that x-rays which are taken by any healthcare professional become the property of the individual rather than of the healthcare profession, in which case the individual could then transport them to whatever other healthcare professional might be most interested in them.
Supplementary to the Minister, all Albertans are delighted with the Premier's Commission on Healthcare. Can the Minister tell us, in light of the fact that there is medical representation on the Commission but no representation from the chiropractic community, what assurance can he give to the chiropractic community that their concerns will indeed have a fair hearing before that Commission?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think anyone in this province anywhere would suggest that the chairman of the commission, Mr. Heinemann, would do other than give a fair hearing to anyone who comes before it.
Supplementary, Edmonton Menilark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, has the this government, not demonstrated a lead in undermining lack of or cooperation between the medical profession and chiropractic by focusing on non-medical services such as chiropractic, podiatry, optometry, etc., and cutbacks under the healthcare system in this province?
No, the honourable member's mistaken about that. What we did do was look to areas that are not covered by the Canada Health Act, where healthcare professionals could direct bill the patient in order to reduce overall cost of the healthcare insurance plan. The honourable member may recall the previous Liberal government in Ottawa implemented an act called the Canada Health Plan that prohibits medical doctors from direct billing patients. That doesn't apply to chiropractors, physiotherapists, podiatrists, optometrists, and others in the system. And it's because of that bill that we were required to move differently with respect to the fees.
Order, please. Order, please. Honourable Minister.
We were required to respond differently to different healthcare professions.
Question period has expired. With the House support that we finish this series of questions? Any opposed? Honourable Member Clover Barr.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Health, a question is asked from the honourable member from Red Deer. A commission is supposedly an independent organization. Therefore, you couldn't have a chiropractor and a dentist and a nurse and a doctor and a veterinarian medicine, etc., on us representing every viewpoint. Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, the purpose of the committee is to get an independent appraisal right across the province. Is this not the way that the mechanism was set up with Mr. Hyman as the chairman?
I thank the honourable member for his excellent explanation.
Supplementary, Edmonton Belmont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Community and Occupational Health, his responsibility is the Workers' Compensation Board. The same thing happens to workplace accident victims, and I'm wondering if the Minister of Community and Occupational Health would advise the Workers' Compensation Board to perhaps allow those unfortunate victims of workplace accidents that their right to choose their choice of method of recovery be enforced so that they can choose it without prejudice and without being penalized.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Speaker, that's the case now.
Before we go to orders of the day, would the Assembly agree with reverting to introduction of special guests? Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In the public gallery are